We're here with Sylvie Goulard, former Minister of the Armed Force of the French government and Deputy Governor of the Banque de France. Mrs. Goulard, economic growth and international trade are proving to be quite resilient, despite today's gloomy picture of wars, conflicts, and rivalries. Economics and politics seems to be two different worlds, but obviously they are not. How to avoid, in your opinion, that political and security issues take the role on world economic prospects?
Well, first of all, if you look at the World Economic Outlook just published by the IMF, the situation is a little bit more differentiated. For example, in Europe, you have countries like Spain above 3%, Germany in recession, Italy and France somewhere in the middle, and we share the same currency. So I would not say that the economy is thriving, and in my opinion, leaders of the economic sector are anticipating troubles. We observed also some fluctuations on the financial markets, and rightly so. Firstly, because of the threats and wars you mentioned, and even more, secondly, because the structural changes our societies are facing, be it climate change and biodiversity loss being a transition to a technological new era, are also long-lasting phenomena, as well as demography. So I would not separate first, and I would look more in a more granular way at the state of the world economy.
As you mentioned, tariffs, trade disputes, rivalries on energy and critical materials are drawing our attention and apparently redefining today's business priorities. Isn't it a too short-sighted view? And what business models should be preferred for a fairer and a prosperous future, in your opinion?
Well, we need to move to circularity and regenerative. I mean, the business model we use and we have been using since the Industrial Revolution is over. I'm very radical on it. We overconsume resources, energy, but also raw materials. And we are clearly not on a sustainable path. We ignore the planetary boundaries. So what we need is really to move to some ways of producing where we recycle much more. It is also a question of sovereignty and independence, where if you are less dependent from supply chains for some raw materials, you also can envisage the future with more confidence. So there are ecological reasons, there are geopolitical reasons to move from the model we knew to something else. And I would quite say that there is also a human dimension. If you look at the way our societies function, the inequalities and the gaps existing within the population with an impact on the political stability, it may be also in the interest of the Western countries to realize we are experiencing in Europe and in the US what the feeling of the people who consider that they are left behind produce as political results. The Brexit was partly based on that. The increase of the extremist parties in Europe and the election of Donald Trump are clearly based on the rejection of some economic model. I'm not saying that the people in charge are able to answer, but we should stop underestimating the fragmentation of the society.
That's very interesting. Thank you. And lastly, narrowing down the perspective to a microeconomic level, how this scenario that you just described is impacting small businesses and what companies should do to improve, in some ways, their resilience to economic shocks?
Resilience is really the right word, because in my opinion, we should not oppose the work we have to do for the transition. less emission of CO2, less consumption of raw materials, etc., and the need to adapt to a geostrategical environment in which the threats have increased. We already had war in Europe, in Ukraine, because of Russia's aggression. We have a situation deteriorating in the Middle East with the invasion of the Gaza area by the Israeli. And now we also have a very serious threat between India and Pakistan. So it is clear that companies cannot choose, and governments neither can choose only one part of the resilience. It is a combination of resilience of the society, being more resilient to climate shocks and nature deterioration, and also taking into account the new geopolitical context.
Sylvie Goulard, thank you so much.
Thank you.